Greetings, friends and followers. This is Nurses Talking. I am Dale Barzy. As always, if you like what you see and hear, subscribe. Leave us a comment and let us know what you think. Here on Nurses Talking, we speak to nurses anywhere in the world and at any stage in their nursing journey. Today, I am very, very pleased to welcome Wendy Dixon-Jewitt out of Saskatchewan, Canada. Wendy says she's a pioneering force in healthcare transformation, and her journey began in the criminal justice system, working with individuals experiencing mental illness and addiction. She says her exceptional skills in behavioral management earned her international recognition as an outstanding teaching parent working with youth in crisis. From there, she developed groundbreaking mental health programs, and now she's working to revolutionize nursing resilience training. And Wendy is on a mission to keep nurses safer and saner by upleveling their interpersonal mastery and dealing with non-physical violence and oppression. So, welcome, 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 Wendy.
Thank you so much for having me, Dale. It's important to note that I didn't start out with these attributes. I was exactly the opposite. Like anything, sometimes the thing that's taking you down and the most difficult for you ends up being an area of expertise because you need to up level in those areas, right? The things that
Exactly.
cause you the most pain end up being your purpose. And that's exactly what has happened to me in my long nursing career.
Mhm,
It earned me
mhm.
all these gray hairs.
Well, but first of all, though, what brought you to nursing?
Well, I think the thing that brought me to nursing is um, as a very little girl, I'm the youngest of five children. My mother became seriously disabled with rheumatoid arthritis, like shortly after I was born. And this was in a time when children were not allowed in hospitals. So my
Mhm.
mom was in the hospital a lot. And so, I'm just a baby in my young years, my formative years, and um I'd be crying because I couldn't go. So my dad said, "I'm gonna take you." So he um he took me to the hospital, and my other siblings, they were, checking ahead and making sure no one was around. And my dad snuck me into the room, and my brother was keeping guard outside the room. And he said, "Dad, there's a nurse coming." And so my dad made me hide under the bed. And of course, which was a good idea. So I needed to see my mom. And when I came out, I saw these white shoes and I saw the white nylons from under the bed, and I was so scared. And and my dad said, "It's okay, you can come out." And here the nurse had brought cookies and orange juice.
So everyone knew you were there.
So that nurse knew I was there, but it was,
Mhm.
you probably remember that time when children
Yeah.
weren't allowed in
Yeah.
hospitals.
Mhm.
And so at the time, I just thought, well, I don't know who made that rule, but nurses are pretty good,
Mhm.
obviously good. And I think that really planted a seed in me. And, but then as I got older, I realized, that was also a big part of crafting my nurse identity because this nurse took a risk. This
Mhm.
nurse knew something wasn't right,
Yeah.
and broke the rules to do what was
Yeah.
right. And somehow that rule got changed. So I like to think it was that nurse that spoke up in a meeting and said, "This is not right." And so I really do think that was also a big part of crafting my nurse identity. That it's our
Uh-huh.
responsibility to try to right the wrongs,
Yeah.
even if the rules are telling us to do this, if it's wrong, we need to speak up and we need to protect the vulnerable. So I think that was a big part of it, Dale, for sure.
But then, once you became a nurse, because you were very little when you had this first impression of a nurse stepping out and breaking the rules to help you. But when you got to be a nurse, how did it challenge you?
Well, like overarching themes, just looking at overarching themes, like originally when I became a nurse, I'm very empathic. So my biggest challenge, there's two big challenge. Number one, I had to learn how to be along the journey, other people's journey, without being in their journey. I was often vicariously traumatized because I
Mm,
was in it with them. And you can't be helpful to other people until you learn that kind of empathic detachment where you can be
yes.
on their journey, but you're not experiencing everything, because otherwise you can't live life outside of work because you're grieving with everyone, you're suffering with everyone,
Mhm.
and that just is debilitating. So I had to learn that. And then the other big thing, and this wasn't in every culture, but I found it always was there in bedside nursing. And that was that hierarchical culture where nurses are 100% responsible for everything, but they really don't have authority. So, and there was also, what you hear about in nursing where, I had a really abusive charge nurse. I had really difficult physicians who were constantly
Mhm.
ego impaired, arrogant. And it wasn't even that they weren't that nice to me. They just really weren't that nice to their patients either. And so for me, it was like I could not. And for me, I didn't actually have trouble as far as oppression with my nursing colleagues, like my peers. I've never
Mhm.
really had trouble with my peers, as so many people do. Like Kathleen Bartholomew's done all the writing on
Mhm.
horizontal violence, and I've certainly experienced it between peers, and I've experienced it as a healthcare leader, seeing it between nurses. But for me personally, I've always had strong peers around me.
Mhm.
Like they were never bullying, they were never, they would tell me what was going on. But so I really had difficulty with that culture. And so I left it, vowing never to return. But you can nurse in a lot of places, but like anything, it's like the universe and God keeps putting it in front of you. So it's like,
Yes.
well, everywhere I go, there I am. So I need to figure out how to break this code. How do how do people do it? And there was people, and I think my greatest gift was that I landed in the justice system with a small team of nurses who were absolutely the polar opposites of personalities, but all of them, almost without exception, had one thing in common. They had grit. They were tough. They were badasses. They knew, and they had all kinds of different things they were doing. So I thought, I need to watch what these nurses are doing and I need to figure this out. So that was kind of the beginning of my quest, my hero's journey, is just like watching these really badass nurses in a tough environment, because corrections didn't want nurses in there. When they first went there, the guards were wearing t-shirts that said, I'd rather my wife was a prostitute than a nurse at the
Wow.
correctional center. Yes, it was hostile, like hostile, not a war zone, but dangerous, hostile, because you had to trust these people to protect you, and they
Yes.
didn't always do that. Some of the old school guards would actually set you up in dangerous situations. So I learned so much from these nurses, like so much. And so
Yeah.
I went on a journey to lots of different places that really didn't require um, me to be a registered nurse, but it was
Uh-huh.
it was that education, because it's the entire lifespan that got me those jobs, because you know so much about everything, all the way from conception to death, you know.
Yes.
And I think that's the other thing that so many nurses miss, Dale, is you don't have to follow the traditional path. Your knowledge and your abilities and your skills can take you many, many places.
Yep.
So don't think you have to stay in toxic cultures that are killing you. You don't have to. You can take your skills and repackage them so many places in the world. And I've been on tremendous journeys with great teams. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big thing. And that's that's one of the things that I really want people to gather from this as I speak to different nurses, is that, wait a minute, there are all these nurses out there doing all these kinds of different things. Yeah, you can
mhm,
do this. Absolutely.
mhm.
Absolutely. So You you're talking now about, the experiences you gained in these environments. And so this that you're a founder of Brainstorm Soft Skill Solutions. What is that?
Well, it's all the things I believe nurses are. It's everything, most of the things, like when you think soft skills, you might think verbal skills, and yes,
Mm,
definitely verbal skills, but it's the things underlying though, it's the value of everything that can't be seen necessarily or can't be heard. It's really how you develop that deep integrity, how you show up in the world. So it's your values, it's your philosophy, it's your beliefs. And for me, a big part of what I do in my company is first and foremost identity. What is your identity? Because we don't think about it, we don't craft it in a purposeful way. We don't and it underpins everything. It underpins every decision we make. It underpins. And if you don't get intentional about it, Dale, since birth, other people, like you are born with a unique identity. And anyone that's had more than one child, they're just like, is
knows
this
that,
even my
yes.
child? Like, so different, right? You are born just like your thumbprints and your fingerprints. You have a unique identity. But most people, in early years, it's crafted by other people. They're telling you who you are. But
Mhm,
even from a very young age, like my second daughter, she's been telling me no since her first word.
mhm.
So, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
we're all very different. But if you're not purposeful and you're not thinking, there's so many ways your identity is laid down by other people.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
first thing I teach nurses to do is you need to take control of your identity. And it's not up to me, it's not up to anyone else to craft your identity. You need to decide who you are. And as you know, like churches all over the world are empty. There's no real kind of moral compass. We're
Hmm.
looking to like celebrities and role models around
Yeah.
us. So if you're going into a culture that's already oppressed, and nursing is an oppressed workforce, and you don't have to believe me, you can read, there's thousands of researchers out there that have been
Talk to a
talking about it.
nurse.
And I had never heard the word, but I knew there was something strange about this culture. Like I knew that there's something wasn't,
Hmm.
it didn't feel right. You know the energy. It doesn't feel right. You don't feel safe to speak.
Hmm.
And if you do speak, you get a bunch of feedback that you can't speak because
Yeah.
you'll lose your
Yeah.
job. And all of
Yeah.
those things are accurate. They're
Hmm.
the realities. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, so how do we get out of this role that's been as a nursing whole as an identity? But I can't change the nursing identity, but I can control my own identity. I can
Hmm.
control who I am. And I need to understand identity boundaries a real thing. So that's one of the first things that we work on is our identity. And in order to craft our identity, we need to know our values. We need to know our beliefs. And we need to know most beliefs are in our subconscious. We don't even know what we believe. It's just like, what do you mean beliefs? I don't know what. It's the mind inside us that's driving us. So once we get purposeful about, and you have to be really careful because like Margaret Wheatley said, once you figure out your vision, your identity and your vision and your mission in life and you may not get to purpose, but you might know, oh, this is what I want to do. And if you write it down, like it's more than words on a piece of paper. It's an energetic force that surrounds you, that
Hmm.
drives you forward, that helps
Hmm.
you make decisions,
Hmm.
so most people and that I know don't intentionally craft their identity. So again, the valuable things that are unseen is where we start. Because once we build that foundation, then the other stuff is just skills and strategies and words. So I can teach you those because I learned them from behavioral scientists. So I was very blessed to have mentors outside of the traditional system because I went skating around the world, to see what people were doing. So I've been very fortunate that way. We've got nurses that are going to be going through things in our system that are so, so difficult that if we don't learn how to protect our identity, protect our psychological space by taking control of it, we will simply be ill, we'll be off work, and we'll be out of the workforce. We will have no nurses. And I absolutely believe that the millions of nurses around the world are the people that can really transform health and transform healing. We just have to step into our power. And it's my deep in the bones in my soul belief that this is true, and they have to realize no one's coming to save them. No
There you
one's
go.
coming to save you. We have to save ourselves individually and
And
collectively.
collectively. Yeah.
Sorry,
I thank you.
I got on a bit of a soapbox there, but
No, but thank you so much for articulating that because I absolutely, honestly subscribe to that, that
Mhm.
we are the ones who have to do it. And this is why I talk to nurses. We must, even if it's just to start talking, we've got to get it out there. We've got to, you talked about regaining or reclaiming our power.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
have to do that. We have to
Yes.
do that. We have to
Mhm.
recognize, first of all, that we have the power and claim it.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And it
Yeah.
is perilous out there. Like a lot of the things I went through, I was on my own. And the interesting thing was, right from the beginning, I spoke truth to power. Like,
Mm,
and so there's two things that would happen. We'd leave a meeting because something was going on, and usually it's because nurses are their workload's increasing,
yeah.
and they're not pushing back, and their workload's increasing, and their workload, and it's
Yeah.
just like, well, you're magical. You can do the work of 17 people, like,
Yeah.
you know, and other professions I was watching as I got more into my practice into leadership, other professions were pushing back. They would engage in resistance. They'd say, no, we can't do that. And yet
Hmm.
nurses who were answering every call while on call to like 50 people having to do their tasks, like
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
they weren't resisting. And so that's when I was like, what is going on here? Like, why? And then I thought, well, I literally watched interactions over here with like, because I led a whole team, including
Mm,
speech and rehab and
yeah.
occupational therapy. It was a rehab program. So I had
Mm,
120 staff of many different disciplines. And I would get tons of resistance and pushback from all the other disciplines. Senior leaders would come down with mandates for nurses, and the nurses just didn't resist. They didn't show up. And I was showing up for them as a leader because I'm a nurse leader, but it's like, I can't be the only one. Like, I
hmm
can't carry this for you. I have
hmm
120 staff. You need to show
hmm
up for yourself. But
Yeah.
they just couldn't seem to. And so then I started on another path where I was learning about, oppression, and I was learning about ethical resistance when I was sort of writing my master's thesis on providing care to people that were verbally abusive. I kind of went
Hmm.
down these pathways.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, it must be the educational process. But it's even then I became an educator, right? It's like, okay, where is this coming from? And yeah, it could be definitely educational for sure. There's some anti-oppression sort of language coming in now, but it's like anti-oppression can't be dictated from above. It has to be an
Hmm
internal transformational
hmm
process where, and that's how culture changes, where it's like, okay, we're done now. No, no, that's not how it's going to go. And then
hmm
shock people because they're just so used to whatever, right? They're used to no resistance. I think her name was Elizabeth Peterson. I'd have to look at the research again. But just before COVID shut down, I was on my way to a conference and it was about ethical resistance. And I had articles and I was fascinated by it. I was really thrilled someone was talking about this issue, about nurses and resistance because I just wasn't seeing it. They just took it and took it and took it. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Take it. Yeah.
this can't go on. Like, you can't keep being the punching bag of the healthcare system. You can't. It's
Yeah.
not possible. And so I was excited to go, but then COVID shut us all down. But I did talk to her on the phone before that. And I was having a nice visit with her. And I said, so, because I was so thrilled she was examining it, the
Hmm
importance of resistance and
Yeah.
ethical resistance. And I said, so what did you find most interesting about nurses and resistance? And she said, out of all the research we've done, it's how seldom nurses engage in any form of resistance. And it was like truth bomb. because that's what I was seeing through my whole practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming out of the rooms where I'd speak truth to power, and it wasn't super controversial, and I was professional, I would just speak the truth.
Yeah,
And I was
yeah.
just speaking things that I knew every nurse in the room was thinking.
Was no, yeah.
I would just speak up. So when we'd leave the room, I'd get two things: either you're going to be fired or you are the voice of nurses. So two things, right? You said exactly
Mm-hmm.
what I was thinking. And I
Mm-hmm.
would, so there was two things. It's like, well, as far as getting fired, for me personally, given my belief system, I said, well, I'd rather lose my job than my soul, because I
Mm-hmm.
personally believe there is an accounting, whether
Yeah,
it's our own accounting from our own higher being, or our soul
yeah.
part of ourselves. There will be an accounting, and I don't want to be like, oh my God, Wendy, what a mess, like you were a train wreck this whole life. Like what were you doing? It's just like I don't want to face that. So it's just like I'd rather go through some heat here than get it
Yeah,
later that I
later.
didn't learn
Mm.
anything I needed to learn. So that's a philosophy. Again, that's a belief I carry with me. So again, talking about philosophies and beliefs. So on the one side, it was about the job. You could lose your job. And then what was the second thing? The second thing was
The second thing is that you were thinking what they were thinking.
that I'm the voice of nurses. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's like, well, you need to speak up. Like if I put myself out there, like why didn't you just come alongside me and just say, all you needed to do was say, I agree. I
Yeah,
agree with Wendy. Like, and
yeah,
again, I'm talking to nurses in my company that not only are nurses not coming along, but they're just saying, you're rocking the boat. And again, now we're in the 21st century. I'm like, how do we get rid of this? So it's not only not sort of seeing it from that nurse's perspective, it's just saying you're just causing problems. And that's the other thing that happens, right, to whistleblowers or anyone that tries to make changes, is their colleagues go after them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and I've never had colleagues come after me, but I've definitely had nurses that just couldn't show up. They couldn't risk it. They'd get to a certain point, but then it's just like, I need my job, which is true. Like
Mm-hmm.
it is
Yeah,
the truth. So I do understand it for sure. Um, but it is the structures and the system and the hierarchy. And I always
yep.
kind of have fun. I call it all the king's horses and all the king's men, and like we're the handmaidens. It's like Margaret Atwood, Handmaid's Tale. It's like,
You hand it.
hey, we need
Mm-hmm.
to stop this, because we literally carry the healthcare system on our back. Literally.
Absolutely.
Without us,
Absolutely.
it's ceased. It's done. It is
Yeah,
done.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
24
It
hours a
comes to a
day.
screeching halt all at once.
Absolutely. It's done.
So, Wendy, you've done so much.
Mhm.
What gives you the most what have you done that gives you the most pleasure right now?
The most pleasure. Well,
Or maybe I should have
I
asked, what are you most proud of? That's
well,
probably
it's
what
kind of it's kind of a different thing. The thing that
yeah.
I'm most proud of is the thing that has caused me absolutely the most pain, and also almost drove me insane. And that was when I came across a really difficult situation as a healthcare leader, really difficult. And I was trying to solve this for many years. And I managed to solve all the problems in the workplace. It was pretty toxic workplace when I got there. The staff all stepped up. It was all wonderful. I had control of the entire facility, but I didn't have control of physicians. So I had a physician that was really very negligent at times, was substandard. I was doing risk reports, and I was getting,
Yeah.
it was terrifying what I was seeing. And it was quantitative. Like he hadn't written a progress note since he entered the building, and he had been there for decades, not one progress note. So this physician had obviously been given a lot of protections.
Yeah.
So I knew it wasn't even really his fault, because if he's being protected like this in the health region, then how many other physicians are being protected like this?
Mm-hmm.
And then a
Mm-hmm.
situation came up that I just couldn't tolerate. So I said, okay, this is the sword I'm going to impale myself on. And I did. Like I stood deep in my integrity. I wasn't going to go along with the power people. This is wrong. This needs to be fixed. And from me, it was perfectly easy to fix. It's called performance management, but
Mm.
I don't have control over physicians.
Mm-hmm.
right? Medical leadership has control over physicians, and the healthcare region has control. And they just, instead of acting and doing what should have not been that difficult, but something they hadn't done for decades, obviously, if you've got a physician that's never written a progress note,
Yeah.
everyone's protected this position. And he's just laughing at me because I'm transparent with him all the way along. And he's just like, they're not going to do anything. What are they going to do? Just
Mm-hmm.
that entitled arrogance, right?
Yeah.
And of course, I know that he's right, but it doesn't matter. I still have to do the process. So at the end of the day, and a lot of staff came alongside me, like it was a big deal. I almost lost my health through the process because the moral distress, the pressure of trying to
Yeah.
change this obvious injustice. Um, and at the end of the day, it just became a cautionary tale because I got fired. They gave me a bag of money to go away. But it was nice because when I was fired, they told me that the senior leader that fired me told me I'd done an exceptional job. I transformed the culture. But this particular health region couldn't live up to my high expectations. So, I mean, they said that, and I recorded it because I asked if I could record it. And I'm just like, but the problem is my expectations weren't high at all. Like, my expectations is that you will performance manage substandard physicians. Can you imagine a nurse that didn't document for one day of their career? Can
You
you
hear
imagine?
about it.
Absolutely. As a healthcare leader, I'm like, I'd have to put in some remediation, say you have to document, and I would follow up and I would report them
Mhm.
to the regulatory body. So at the end of it all, it was like, well, why didn't you just report them to the regulatory body? And I'm just like, how do you think that's going to go? Like lots of nurses have, and I tell you what has happened to those nurses is
Mhm.
they're blacklisted because
Yeah.
I know because I'm a manager, and they would say, oh, don't hire that nurse because they're trouble. And by trouble, they literally, as I dug deeper, I found out, oh, they tried to do something about this physician.
Yeah.
Oh, they tried to do something. So they were, I wasn't the first
Yeah.
person. I just did it the loudest.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
it the longest. I was burnt out and I really had to go into radical self-care. So I think that's why my course is called Broken to Badass, because it really doesn't matter where you are in the continuum. And it's not linear. It's not like, oh, one and done. Oh, I made it. It's like, oh no, here I was on top of my game and you had talked about things you were proud of. Well, I was working at the Canadian Mental Health Association in Canada. I had this idea about early intervention because I worked in mental illness and I looked after children. And what would happen is if a parent became mentally ill, children would end up in foster care, and then a tragedy, a difficulty
Yeah.
turns into a catastrophe. So I thought, we need to stop this from happening. So I had this idea to support families where a parent had a mental illness, like an early intervention program. Let's go in and support them, make sure the
Mhm.
kids are okay, so we're not causing more trauma through a
Yeah.
really difficult illness situation. And it took 6 years of pitching it, pitching everyone I talked to. What about this? Because you're always looking for money, right? Innovation, like, and I'm still like, money is always the thing. It's like, it's impossible to get resources behind great
Yeah.
ideas. Like
Yeah.
it takes all your, and like I've got boxes full of proposals that have been said no to, but this one caught fire. This one got funding. And it was called Lasting Impressions, and it's an early intervention program for families where a parent had a mental illness. So we had peer support for the kids, we had alternative caregivers, we had family mentors, so that social services didn't need to worry about the kids because we were wrapped around them, right?
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
engaged with them. And I would have, not for profits can make $6,000 last a long time. We would have people that were alternative caregivers just go into the house, be in the house, could be in the house 12, 24 hours a day for a really decent price point because they were just there as a
Yeah.
person, knowing that everything's okay. They're not like $250 an hour psychologist or
Yeah.
psychiatrist. No, they're just
Mhm.
good people, just like supervisors that would just go in and make sure the kids are
Make
fine
sure.
and everyone's
Mhm.
doing okay. So that took off in the 90s and has won awards and is continuing this day through Child and Family Services. And so that makes me feel really good because there's a lot of ideas I've pitched that can never get funding.
Yeah.
You can
Mhm.
just never find the pool. You can never get to the water. And it's so frustrating because all these things that are not effective, that are not helpful, especially in
Yeah.
mental health and psychiatry,
Mhm.
are taking billions, and
Yeah.
they've been frustrating people for half a century. It's like, we need to stop this. We need to divert funding into these community
The way it
programs.
matters.
Yeah. So, I mean, there have been some great wins for me that weren't just, getting the crap kicked out of me for standing by my,
I have
identity, right?
your again identity, yes. So I have two questions before we go. Number
Okay.
one is advice would you give somebody now who wants to be a nurse?
Same I gave my daughter. Absolutely not. Do not go into nursing. No. There are a lot better ways to make a living that won't destroy your physical and your mental health. No. So if they don't listen to you, then they phone you in the middle of it. My daughter's working intensive care right now. And she's like, I said, what do you do? And she goes, oh, I'm seriously questioning my life choices. It's hard. It's tough work. If you think, oh, this will be a nice paycheck, um,
That's not it.
don't do it. If it's something like, I honestly didn't know if I wanted to be a nurse. I started out as a nursing assistant, and nursing
Mm.
assistants work so hard.
Yeah.
Like, I was a nursing assistant for 5 years, and I would see these 60-year-olds and at that time we had no lifts, we had no sliders, we were physically lifting. And I'm like, I cannot do this at the age of 60. There's no way. And of course,
Mhm.
there's nurses around. So I said, well, I'll become a nurse. And if I don't really stay a nurse, if I decide I don't like the profession, the knowledge will never be a waste,
Yeah.
because we all have to navigate our bodies. We
Hmm.
all have to navigate the health system. And I stay true to that to this day. I believe, some countries have everyone join the army. I believe
Hmm.
every human being should have advanced knowledge of these systems, the financial and healthcare
Yeah.
systems,
Hmm.
so that they can navigate them. Because if you're out there on your own, oh
You're
man,
just lost. You're just
yeah,
lost.
that's a scary thing. But nursing's been wonderful to me. My designation of nursing has been wonderful to me. I've never been without work. I've always been able to find a job.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
even when I started, there was no permanent full-time, but I worked 5 years as a casual, which gave me full-time work, because of course they needed nurses. They just weren't hiring for
Yeah.
whatever.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not, if you're a paycheck player, there's easier paychecks.
There are. There are. There are. And so what do you do? We talked a lot about self-care. What do you do to care for you?
Well, I really, coming off COVID, I was really burnt out. I ended up really being far away from my baseline personality. I was angry, I was frustrated, I was exhausted. There was just so much to navigate. So there, I really went into radical self-care. And what I found out is, the anchor for me was definitely meditation. I would absolutely, the law of subtraction. Like, you hear a lot about the law of attraction. I think
Hmm.
what's even more important is the law of subtraction. Like, taking anything, like, we're energetic beings. So if if we're burnt out, it means our energy's totally depleted and we've literally gone dark. So how can we, first of all, let's take away anything that's draining our battery. So I stopped watching any news. Don't watch any news. I didn't watch anything on TV that was the least bit toxic or destructive,
Mm.
violent. I really watched what was going in, what the people I was hanging out with, if they were negative, if they were catastrophizing, I just didn't spend time with them. And I moved to really doing that meditation, and the anchor for rebooting, the fast track for rebooting your energy is gratitude. Getting into a gratitude practice. Like, I don't know what it is, it's magical or it's mystical, but it reframes your entire brain away from that darkness,
Hmm.
back to
Hmm.
the light. Because you have to go, again, we're dark and we're
Yeah.
light, we're
Yeah.
good and we're evil. You have to reorientate. So I still, to this day, like, and I'm still coming back. Like, I'm still getting back to my baseline personality. Like, I'm creative. I have a great sense of humor, but for a while, I was just angry. I was just exhausted, and I knew it's like I need to get back to who I am, the essence of who I am. So gratitude, like every morning I start with a gratitude practice before I get out of bed. The last thing I do before I go to sleep is gratitude.
Mm.
And also you have to quiet your mind. Like, and I learned this early in my 20s. I was always speaking and doing television and radio and stuff, like, because I was a mental illness advocate, but I started having panic attacks and I
Mm.
was introduced to hypnosis. And I always say, I don't know if it was a $500 I had to pay for the sessions or
Mhm.
if it was the hypnosis itself. But whatever process that was, once I was done that process, I never had another panic attack. And so it's something about quieting your mind. And you probably know, I have a racing mind, right? My mind races.
Mm. Mhm.
So I started literally with quieting my mind in my 20s. I started by setting the timer on the stove for like 2 minutes. And that was torture, right? and your mind's flying in a million different directions.
Yeah.
I was just bringing it back to one word. So I mean, in meditation, it could be Om. I would
Mhm.
just bring it back to the word love or
Mm.
one. Just
Mhm.
again, taking control of your mind, because that's the first thing you need to take control of. You have to take control of your mind. Don't let it run wild. It's like having a dog that's out of control. And if
Mhm.
you've ever had any friends that love dogs, but they're not trained at all, they're just impossible. They're jumping up on you. They're knocking your kids over.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
on the
yeah.
table. They're just wild, right? They're distracted. Like, no, you have to train your mind. You have to take, again, that third eye. You have to take control of your thoughts, what you're thinking. And once I did that, like now I can lay for 40 minutes just quietly refocusing. When I think back to in my 20s, when literally 2 minutes was pure torture,
Forever.
yeah, I was just agitated. So that's a big part. Like you have to quiet that mind down. You have to give your brain a chance to go to screensaver. You have to do, and of course, sleep. You have to figure out a way to get good sleep.
Yeah.
The other thing I came across that I absolutely am a proponent now is earthing.
Okay.
And I was really in distress one time, and my girlfriend said, just take off your shoes, go barefoot, and walk around the football field. And I said, okay, because I didn't know anything about earthing or grounding, hadn't read the science on it at all. And I walked around the field and I came back and I was absolutely back in my body. I had a really nice sleep. And then after that, I started looking at the science and earthing. And there's tons of science because, of course, the earth is electromagnetic and we're
Mm-hmm.
electromagnetic. And there's a ton of science and hypothesis around the fact that when we really started getting into trouble as a species and our mental health and our energetics and everything is when we got rubberized shoes,
Mm.
because it's blocking that grounding into Mother Earth.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
blocking
Mm-hmm.
our connection. So now, and it was great. Like my husband, I didn't even talk to him about that. He just said, I'm taking my shoes off and I'm just sitting in the yard. And he started a practice of doing this for 10 minutes every day. He says, I don't know, I just feel better afterwards. And then I showed him on YouTube some videos and he's like, oh, well, there you go. I'm a smart guy. See, I just knew it because I felt it, right? But it's the
You
same
felt
with
right.
gardening.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
touch the earth, get under a
yeah,
tree, get back to nature.
yeah.
So those are definitely the anchors for that self-care. But really, the law of subtraction, there's too much noise in the world. There's too much
Yeah,
toxins and poisons in
yeah,
thoughts
yeah,
and words. It's like
yeah.
if you can't control it, you don't need to be involved in it. And I still tell myself, I don't need to have an opinion on this. And the philosophy I really started following was a Stoic philosophy.
Mm.
And I already did have a Stoic philosophy, but I just was introduced to it again through my husband. And it's like, yes, this is exactly what we have to do. And it's centuries old from, back to Marcus Aurelius. Like he
Mm-hmm.
was an emperor of
Yeah,
countries and
he
lands. And
was.
he wrote, this is how you get through the day, and this is how you live your life. So I started following Ryan Halliday, and I get
Mm.
his daily Stoic reflections every day. But it's just like, yes, this is exactly the philosophy future nurses need to follow in order to be able to move unscathed through really, really difficult and
Yeah,
traumatic
yeah.
visuals and things that we have to walk through in this world.
Really turbulent stuff sometimes.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
devastating things.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Wendy, I cannot thank you enough for this conversation. It has been so fulfilling, so enlightening, so informative. Thank you so very, very much for this. I truly appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and it's always a pleasure to have a conversation with a nurse that's out there in the world trying to make a difference for other nurses out there. I know I'm too old to do the 14, 18-hour days. I'm too old for
Yes.
that, but I
Yeah,
can
gotcha.
share the knowledge I've learned along the way, and hopefully people don't have to, learn by the school of hard knocks the way you and I had to do. There's shortcuts to
They're
getting
short.
to where you need to be and to protecting your psychology and to protect your health and also to safely speak up for yourself professionally but also just be heard, because honestly, the safety of your patients, they're counting on you to show up.
Yeah, yeah,
And we
yeah,
need to do that for people, for vulnerable people, increasingly vulnerable people in our world,
yeah, yeah,
including
yeah.
ourselves as a collective.
Including ourselves,
Including
including
ourselves. We
ourselves.
need to speak up
Yes,
for ourselves. So
yes,
thank you
yes.
very much, Dale, and I'm excited to follow your podcast and learn more about what you've been up to. So thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you, Wendy. Have a great day.
Thank you.